I'm Rhea Calder, 41 years old, and I worked my way up from a small-town ROTC cadet to a full-bird colonel in the United States Air Force. 20 years of service, sacrifice, and silence. For years, I sent money home when my family struggled, paid their bills, covered their emergencies, and kept showing up even when they didn't. But when they accused me of lying about my rank and dragged me into court for faking my service, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people you sacrificed everything for? If so, tell me your story in the comments, because you're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself, even against your own family, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your worth. What happened next might surprise you. It started with doubt, quiet comments at family dinners, the kind you brush off at first because they sound almost playful. My uncle's smirk when I mentioned command briefings. My sister's eye roll when I said I was flying back to DC for joint ops. Even my mother started repeating it. You've always had such an imagination, Rhea. At 41, I was a full-bird colonel in the Air Force, serving with Joint Special Operations Command. 20 years in. 2 decades of proving myself in rooms where I was the only woman, the youngest officer, the one they underestimated until I opened my mouth. I'd flown combat missions over Kandahar. I'd coordinated strikes from Ramstein. I'd sat in classified briefings where decisions were made that would never see daylight. But to my family, it sounded like a fantasy I'd built to feel important. The comments started small. At Thanksgiving, my brother Tobin asked if I was still doing that military thing. My sister Marin laughed and said, Rhea's always been good at making things sound bigger than they are. My father, Elias, just looked at me across the table with this expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe. Or disbelief. I tried to explain once. Tried to walk them through the structure. How ROTC led to flight school, how flight school led to my first deployment, how deployments led to commendations, how commendations opened doors to special operations, how 20 years of work, of sacrifice, of missed birthdays and holidays and weddings had built something real. My father cut me off. Paper doesn't make a soldier, Rhea. I should have heard the warning in that moment. Should have recognized the edge in his voice. But I was too busy trying to make him understand, too busy defending what shouldn't have needed defending. A week later, my mother sent a message that changed everything. If it's true, prove it. I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Sitting in my apartment near Andrews Air Force Base, still in my flight suit from a training exercise, I read them over and over. If it's true. As if 20 years of service, of sacrifice, of sending money home when they needed it, of missing my own life to support theirs, as if all of that could be summarized and dismissed with those 4 words. I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? Should I photograph my uniform? Send them my DD-214? Invite them to a classified briefing they'd never be cleared for? Instead, I went back to work. We had an operation ramping up, coordination with CENTCOM that required my attention. Real work. Real responsibilities. I told myself the comment would blow over, that my mother was just repeating something my father had said, that families sometimes say things they don't mean. But the comments didn't stop. They escalated. Marin posted something on social media, vague enough to maintain plausible deniability, specific enough that I knew exactly what she meant. Something about people who lie about their accomplishments and stolen valor. I saw it at 0200 between briefings, scrolling through my phone during a rare moment of downtime. The post had 37 likes, 17 comments. Most from people I'd grown up with, people who'd known me since I was a kid with braces and big dreams. I deleted the app. Tobin called a few days later. Drunk from the sound of it. Asked me point blank if I was really a colonel or just playing dress up. I hung up. He called back. I didn't answer. My father sent an email, formal, almost clinical. He wanted documentation. He wanted proof of rank, proof of deployment, proof of income. He wanted to verify the claims I'd been making. As if I'd been going around bragging instead of quietly doing my job. As if the money I'd sent them over the years, the mortgage payment when his business failed, the medical bills when mom got sick, the the bail money when Tobin got his second DUI, as if all of that had come from nowhere. I forwarded the email to my attorney. Not because I thought I'd need a lawyer, but because something about the tone made my instincts flare. 20 years in the military teaches you to recognize threats, even when they come from unexpected directions. Lisa, no, Mara. Mara Voss. My attorney's name was Mara Voss, and she'd handled my will and estate planning the year before. She read the email and called me immediately. Ria, she said, this sounds like they're building a case. A case for what? I don't know yet. But this language, verify claims, documentation required, fraudulent representation, this isn't a family asking questions. This is someone collecting evidence. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because the idea was so absurd, so fundamentally impossible, that it couldn't be real. My family was angry, maybe. Confused, definitely. But taking me to court? Over what? Over being successful? Over having a career they didn't understand? They're just being difficult, I said. It'll pass. Mara was quiet for a moment. Then, I hope you're right. But I'm going to start a file, just in case. I should have listened to her. Should have taken the threat seriously. But I was busy. We had an operation in Syria that required coordination, and I was the liaison between JSC and AFRICOM, and there were 16-hour days and classified briefings and decisions that actually mattered. My family's doubts felt small by comparison. Petty. Beneath my attention. I was wrong. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Hand-delivered by a process server who waited while I signed for it. I remember standing in my doorway, still in running clothes from my morning PT, holding this thick manila envelope and feeling my stomach drop before I even opened it. Inside, a formal petition. Filed in civil court. Plaintiff, Elias Calder, on behalf of the family. Defendant, Colonel Ria Calder. Charges: fraud, misrepresentation of military status, stolen valor, fraudulent income reporting. My own family had taken me to court. I read the petition 3 times. Each time, the words became less real, more surreal. They claimed I'd fabricated my career. That I'd forged documents. That I'd stolen valor, one of the most serious accusations you can level at someone in uniform. They'd assembled evidence, questions about how someone my age could achieve my rank, doubts about my deployment stories, skepticism about my income. They'd turned my success into proof of fraud. I called Mara. She'd already heard. Apparently, the petition had been filed the day before, and she'd been trying to reach me, but I'd been in a SCF all day, phone locked away, unreachable. How bad is it? I asked. Bad, she said. They're serious. They have a lawyer. They're claiming you've defrauded them financially and damaged their reputation by association. Ria, they're asking for damages and a public acknowledgement that you misrepresented your military service. That's insane. I know. But we still have to respond. And we need to do it carefully because stolen valor accusations, even false ones, can end careers. She was right. Even the accusation could trigger an investigation. Could get me suspended pending review. Could destroy 20 years of work in a matter of weeks. I sat down on my couch, still holding the petition, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Just this cold, clear understanding. My family didn't believe in me. Despite everything, despite decades of proof, they'd chosen to believe I was a liar. And now I'd have to prove them wrong in court. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Not the grand, dramatic space you see in movies, but a modest room with fluorescent lights and uncomfortable wooden benches. I arrived early, dressed in my service uniform, not because Mara told me to, though she had, but because I needed the armor. The structure. The reminder of who I was when everything else felt uncertain. I sat at the defendant's table and watched my family file in. My father first. Elias walked with the same rigid posture he'd had since his Navy days, but there was something different now. He wouldn't look at me. Just found his seat in the plaintiff's section and stared straight ahead, jaw tight, hands folded. My mother next. Delia looked smaller somehow, diminished. She glanced my way once, just once, and I saw something like apology flash across her face before she looked away. She sat beside my father, her hands twisting in her lap. Then Marin. My sister wore a black suit that made her look like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was. Maybe this was the death of whatever we'd once been to each other. She smirked when she saw me, leaned over to whisper something to her lawyer. They both looked at me and smiled. Tobin came in last, looking uncomfortable in a tie that was clearly borrowed. He at least had the decency to look conflicted, his eyes darting between me and our father like he wasn't sure which side he was supposed to be on. Mara arrived and sat beside me. "How are you holding up?" "I've been through worse." It was true. I'd sat in briefing rooms while mortars fell outside. I'd coordinated operations where one wrong decision meant lives lost. I'd faced down generals who thought I was too young, too female, too whatever to deserve my rank. But this was different. This was my family calling me a liar. The judge entered, the Honorable Patrice Keene, according to the nameplate. She was maybe late 50s, with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie and excuse the legal system had to offer. She settled into her chair, opened the file, and started reading without any preamble. Case number 2024, CV 8847, Elias Calder et al. Versus Colonel Rhea Calder, allegations of fraud and misrepresentation of military service. She looked up. "This is preliminary hearing to determine if there's sufficient evidence to proceed to trial." "Mr. Morrison, you're representing the plaintiffs." My family's lawyer stood. Gerald Morrison, according to Mara's notes. Specialist in civil fraud cases, apparently. He had that practiced courtroom confidence, the kind that comes from winning cases where he probably shouldn't have. "Yes, Your Honor. We're prepared to present evidence that the defendant has systematically misrepresented her military rank and service record, defrauding her family both financially and emotionally over a period of years." Judge Keene looked at me. "And you're Colonel Calder?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "You're here represented by Ms. Voss?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you deny these allegations?" "Completely, Your Honor. Every claim they're making is false." She nodded, made a note, then turned back to Morrison. "Proceed." What followed was surreal. Morrison presented their evidence like he was prosecuting a criminal. He showed photos of me in uniform, questioning the ribbons and insignia. He presented printouts from military forums where people had discussed whether someone my age could realistically achieve the rank of colonel. He even had an expert witness, some retired Army sergeant who'd never made it past E7, who testified that my career trajectory was highly unusual. Unusual. Not impossible. Not fraudulent. Unusual. But Morrison made it sound sinister. He talked about stolen valor cases, about people who'd fabricated military careers for personal gain. He showed examples of forged documents, fake uniforms, elaborate lies. Then he'd look at me and let the implication hang there. "She's one of them." My father was called to testify. He took the stand stiffly, still not looking at me. "Mr. Calder," Morrison said, "when did you first begin to suspect your daughter was misrepresenting her military service?" "About 3 years ago," my father said. His voice was rough, like the words hurt coming out. "She said she'd made lieutenant colonel. She was only 39. I looked it up. That's young for that rank." "What did you do?" I asked her about it. She got defensive. Started talking about accelerated promotion boards and special assignments. It sounded like excuses. "Did you believe her?" A pause. Long enough that I felt it in my chest. Then, "No." Morrison nodded sympathetically. "And when she claimed to have been promoted to full colonel 2 years later, at age 41, what was your reaction?" I knew she was lying. Nobody makes colonel that young. Not in the real military. The real military. As if my 20 years of service were somehow fake because he didn't understand them. Mara cross-examined, but gently. She established that my father had never actually verified his suspicions, never contacted the Air Force, never asked to see my personnel file. He'd just decided I was lying and built his case from there. "Mr. Calder," Mara asked, "did your daughter send money to help with your mortgage in 2022? "Yes." "How much?" $40,000. "And she paid for your wife's surgery in 2023? "Yes." "How much?" $60,000. "Where did you think that money came from, if not from her military salary?" My father's jaw tightened. I don't know. Maybe she had debt. Maybe she was lying about that too. Mara sat down. There was nothing more to say. He'd already proven her point. He'd accepted my money while believing I was a fraud. The cognitive dissonance didn't bother him at all. Marin testified next. She was more composed, more calculated. She talked about how I'd always exaggerated things, how I'd been dramatic as a teenager, how she'd never quite trusted my stories about deployments and operations. Did you ever ask to see proof? Mara asked during cross-examination. No. Did you ever visit your sister at any of her duty stations? No. Did you ever attend any military ceremonies or events where her rank could have been verified? No. She never invited us. Actually, Mara said, pulling out a document, I have here 3 separate invitations your sister sent to family members for promotion ceremonies and change of command events. You received one for her promotion to lieutenant colonel in 2022. Do you remember that? Marin shifted. I might have. I was busy. Too busy to attend your sister's promotion ceremony, but not too busy to accuse her of fraud 3 years later? Objection, Morrison said. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Keene said. But she was looking at Marin with new interest. The hearing dragged on. More testimony. More evidence that amounted to nothing but suspicion and resentment. My brother testified briefly, mostly echoing what our father had said. He looked miserable doing it, but he did it anyway. Through it all, I sat there silently. The military teaches you restraint. It teaches you to stay calm under pressure, to keep your emotions locked down, to never let them see you break. In that courtroom, that training became armor. But inside, I was breaking. Because every word they spoke was another crack in something I'd thought was unbreakable. My family, my blood, the people who were supposed to know me best. They didn't know me at all. Judge Keene finally called a recess. 3 hours of testimony, and we hadn't even gotten to my defense yet. Mara leaned over. You okay? I'm fine. You don't have to be fine. What they're doing, I said I'm fine. She nodded, backed off. She knew me well enough by now to recognize when I needed space. I stood, straightened my uniform, and walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, I found a corner near a window and stood there, looking out at nothing. Just breathing. Just trying to hold it together for a few more hours. That's when I heard my mother's voice behind me. Rhea. I didn't turn around. Rhea, please. Can we talk? We're talking in court, Mom. That's where you wanted this conversation. I didn't want this. Your father, Dad, didn't file this alone. You all signed it. You all chose this. Silence. Then, quietly, I'm sorry. I turned then. Looked at her. Really looked. She'd aged since I'd last seen her, more gray in her hair, more lines around her eyes. She looked tired. Sad. But not sad enough to stop this. Are you? I asked. Sorry enough to drop the case? She didn't answer. Just looked away. That's what I thought. I walked away before she could say anything else. Before I could let her see how much this was costing me. Back in the courtroom, Judge Keene resumed the hearing. It was our turn now. Mara stood. Your Honor, the defense would like to present evidence that completely refutes every allegation made here today. We have documentation. That's not necessary yet, Judge Keene interrupted. She was looking at the plaintiff's evidence with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mr. Morrison, I've reviewed everything you've presented, and I have to be honest, I'm not seeing anything here that constitutes fraud. Unusual career progression isn't fraud. Family skepticism isn't evidence. Morrison stood quickly. Your Honor, we have expert testimony. You have a retired sergeant who admits he doesn't know anything about Air Force promotion boards. That's not expertise. That's speculation. She closed the file. I'm inclined to dismiss this case unless you have something more substantial. Morrison looked panicked. Your Honor, we request a continuance to gather additional evidence. I'd also like to request something, Mara said, standing. We'd like to call a witness who can speak directly to Colonel Calder's service record and rank. Judge Keene looked interested. Who? Someone from her chain of command, Your Honor. With your permission, we've arranged for a witness who can verify everything Colonel Calder has claimed. Morrison objected. Your Honor, that's highly irregular, so is bringing a sitting military officer to court on fraud charges, Judge Keene said dryly. Ms. Voss, your witness can appear? He's actually here, Your Honor. He arrived this morning. If the court would allow it, we'd like to call him now. Judge Keene nodded. Bailiff, bring in Ms. Voss's witness. I looked at Mara, confused. She hadn't told me she was calling anyone. Hadn't said anything about a witness from my command. I'd specifically told her I didn't want to drag anyone else into this family mess. But then the courtroom doors opened, and General Orion Cade walked in. For stars gleaming on his shoulders. Full dress uniform. Chest covered in ribbons that represented 3 decades of service. He moved with that particular kind of authority that comes from commanding thousands of people, from making decisions that shaped policy and operations, from being one of the most senior officers in the United States Air Force. The room went silent. My brother's jaw dropped. My sister went pale. My father straightened in his seat, old military instincts kicking in despite everything. Even Judge Keene stood. General Cade nodded to her, then to me. His expression was neutral, professional. But I saw something in his eyes, not pity, not anger, just acknowledgement. This shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't be here. But since you are, we'll end it. He took the stand, was sworn in, and sat with the same precise movements I'd seen 100 times in briefings. Mara approached. General Cade, could you state your name and rank for the record? General Orion Cade, United States Air Force. 4-star general, currently serving as commander of Air Force Special Operations Command. And how do you know Colonel Rhea Calder? Colonel Calder has served under my command for the past 7 years. She's currently assigned to Joint Special Operations Command as a senior liaison officer. Morrison stood. Objection, Your Honor. We weren't informed. Sit down, Mr. Morrison, Judge Keene said. Her voice had changed. Gone was the skeptical judge. Now she sounded almost deferential. You don't interrupt a 4-star general in her courtroom. Continue, Ms. Voss. General Cade, can you verify Colonel Calder's rank and service record? Absolutely. Colonel Calder is a commissioned officer with 20 years of active duty service. She holds the rank of 06, full colonel, earned through standard promotion boards. Her record includes multiple combat deployments, commendations for valor, and classified assignments that I cannot discuss in open court, but which are documented in sealed portions of her file. Is there any question in your mind about the legitimacy of her rank? None whatsoever. Colonel Calder has earned every achievement in her record. In fact, he paused, glanced at me, then continued. In fact, she's one of the most capable officers I've ever had the privilege of commanding. Her promotion to colonel at age 41 wasn't unusual, it was deserved. And if anything, she should have made it sooner. Mara nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. Morrison stood for cross-examination. I could see him sweating. What do you ask a 4-star general? How do you challenge someone who outranks everyone in the room? General Cade, he started, isn't it true that age 41 is young for the rank of colonel? It's younger than average, yes. It's also not unprecedented. Officers who demonstrate exceptional performance and potential can be promoted ahead of their peers. That's how a merit-based system works. But how can we be certain, Mr. Morrison, General Cade said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. I have personally reviewed Colonel Calder's personnel file multiple times. I have written letters of recommendation for her promotion boards. I have observed her performance in high-pressure situations where lives were at stake. If you're asking whether I'm certain about her rank and service, the answer is yes. Completely certain. Morrison sat down. He had nothing left. Judge Keene looked at General Cade. General, I appreciate you taking the time to appear today. Unless the plaintiff has additional questions, you're excused. General Cade stood, buttoned his jacket. Then he did something I didn't expect. He looked directly at my father, held his gaze for a long moment, and then he turned to me and saluted. A 4-star general saluting a colonel. It wasn't just protocol, it was a statement, a public acknowledgement, a message to everyone in that courtroom. She earned this. She deserves this. And you were wrong to doubt her. I stood and returned the salute, my arm moving with muscle memory trained over 2 decades. Then General Cade turned to Judge Keene and added, almost as an afterthought, "Your Honor, I should mention one more thing. In certain operational contexts, when Colonel Calder is serving as a mission commander on Joint Task Force operations, she holds tactical authority that supersedes rank. In those situations," he paused, looked around the courtroom. "She outranks everyone in this room, including me." The silence was absolute. He nodded once more and left. The doors closed behind him, and for a long moment, nobody moved. Judge Keene was the first to speak. "Mr. Morrison, do you have any additional evidence to present?" Morrison looked at his notes, at my family, at the empty witness stand. "No, Your Honor." "Then I'm dismissing this case. With prejudice." She looked at my father. "Mr. Calder, I don't know what's going on in your family, but you just wasted this court's time with baseless accusations against an officer who has dedicated her life to serving this country. You should be ashamed." She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." We weren't always like this. Growing up, my father was my hero. Elias Calder, Navy corpsman, Desert Storm veteran. He'd served for years, come home with commendations and stories he'd only tell when he'd had a few drinks. Stories about field hospitals and saving lives under fire and what it meant to wear the uniform. He was proud of his service. Proud in that quiet, steady way that military people often are. He never bragged, never exaggerated. Just carried himself with that particular kind of dignity that comes from knowing you did something that mattered. I wanted to be like him. When I was 8, I found his old uniform in the basement. The Navy working khakis, worn and faded. I put on the shirt, it hung past my knees, and marched around the house saluting everything. My father found me and laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. It was proud. "You want to serve?" he asked. I nodded. "Like you." "Good," he said. "Just remember, it's not about the uniform. It's about what you do while wearing it." I carried those words with me through high school, through college, through ROTC. When I commissioned as a second lieutenant at 23, my father was in the front row. He saluted me afterward, informal, just between us, and I saw tears in his eyes. "You did it," he said. "I'm proud of you." That was the last time I remember him saying those words. My brother Tobin joined the reserves the same year I commissioned. He'd always been competitive with me, always trying to prove he was just as good, just as capable. But military life didn't suit him the way it suited me. He struggled with the discipline, the structure, the expectations. After a year, he stopped going to drills. After 2, he was discharged for unsatisfactory participation. I was in flight school when it happened. I called him, tried to be supportive, told him there were other ways to serve. He hung up on me. Marin, my sister, never had any interest in the military. She went to community college, got her paralegal certificate, married young. She and I were never close, 6 years apart in age, different interests, different lives. But we were civil. Polite. We sent birthday cards and showed up for holidays. But something changed after Tobin's discharge. Family gatherings became tense. My father started asking pointed questions about my career, my deployments, my rank. Questions that sounded like he was looking for holes in my story rather than actually interested. I didn't understand it then. Didn't see the resentment building. I was too busy flying. Too busy deploying to Kandahar and Bagram and places I couldn't name. Too busy proving myself in a career where being a woman meant you had to be twice as good to get half the credit. My first deployment was in 2006. I was a first lieutenant, 25 years old, fresh from flight school, and absolutely certain I was ready for anything. I wasn't. Nothing prepares you for the reality of combat, the weight of it, the constant vigilance, the way fear becomes background noise you learn to ignore. I flew transport missions mostly, moving personnel and equipment between bases. Routine stuff, except nothing's routine when people are shooting at you. I came home after 6 months with a new understanding of what my father's service had meant. The sacrifices he'd made. The things he'd seen that he'd never talked about. I called him from Germany during my layover. Tried to tell him what it had been like, tried to share something real. "Everyone thinks they're special after their first deployment," he said. "Wait until you've done a few more. Then we'll talk." I thought he was joking. Looking back, I'm not sure he was. I made captain at 27, ahead of my peer group. Major at 32. Each promotion came with more responsibility, more deployments, more time away from home, and less communication with my family. I'd call and get voicemail. I'd send emails that went unanswered. I'd come home on leave and find everyone busy, schedules full, no time to meet up. The only time they seemed interested was when they needed something. In 2021, my father's landscaping business failed. Bad economy, bad decisions, bad luck. He called me for the first time in a year. Didn't ask how I was doing, didn't ask about my career. Just, we're going to lose the house. I wired $40,000 the next day. Enough to cover the mortgage and give them breathing room. It cleaned out most of my savings, but they were family. You help family. My father sent a text, received. Thanks. That was it. No follow-up, no gratitude, no acknowledgement of what that money meant to me. A year later, my mother was diagnosed with a heart condition. Surgery required. Their insurance wouldn't cover all of it. Marin called this time. Mom needs $60,000 for the surgery. Dad's too proud to ask, but we're desperate. I had just made lieutenant colonel. Had just gotten a pay raise that made me feel, for the first time in my career, like I was financially stable. I'd been planning to buy a house, start building something beyond base housing and temporary quarters. Instead, I sent $60,000 to my mother's surgeon. This time, no one even sent a text. I got promoted to full colonel in 2023. 41 years old, 20 years of service, one of the youngest full-bird colonels in special operations. It should have been one of the proudest moments of my career. I called my father to tell him. He answered on the fourth ring. Colonel, I said. I made colonel, Dad. Silence. Then, that's a high rank, Rhea. Yes, it is. Seems young for that. I've been in for 20 years. It's competitive, but not impossible. That sound he made when he didn't believe something. Well, congratulations, I guess. He hung up before I could say anything else. That's when the doubt started showing up on social media. Marin's posts. Tobin's comments. Little digs about people who lie and fake heroes. Never using my name, but obvious enough that people asked me about it. I ignored it. I had work to do. A joint task force operation in East Africa, coordination with AFRICOM and EUCOM, classified briefings that required my full attention. My family's petty resentment seemed small compared to actual problems. I was wrong to dismiss it. Resentment doesn't shrink when you ignore it. It grows. The final straw came at Christmas 2023. I'd managed to get leave, flew commercial back to Virginia for 3 days. I showed up at my parents' house with gifts, with stories I could tell, with hope that maybe we could rebuild something. The house was full, Marin's family, Tobin and his girlfriend, extended relatives. Everyone talking and laughing until I walked in. The room got quiet. My father looked at me from his chair. Looked at my clothes, I wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a sweater, and said, "Surprised you had time to visit. Thought you'd be too busy being important." The tone was ugly. Everyone heard it. I stayed 2 hours. Gave out gifts. Made polite conversation. Left before dinner because I couldn't stand the way they looked at me, like I was lying just by existing. That was the last time I saw them before the lawsuit. 3 weeks later, my father's email arrived. The one demanding documentation, proof, verification. I should have known then what was coming. Should have protected myself. But part of me still believed that family meant something. That blood counted for more than suspicion. I was naive. The legal papers arrived 6 weeks after that. And suddenly I was sitting across from my father in a courtroom, watching him testify that he'd never believed in me, that everything I'd accomplished was suspect, that I was probably a fraud. 20 years of service. 2 decades of sacrifice. Hundreds of thousands of dollars sent home when they needed it. And they took me to court. After General Cade left the courtroom, after Judge Keene dismissed the case, I stood in the hallway while Mara talked to the clerk about paperwork. My family filed out, my father first, still not looking at me. My mother next, moving slowly like she'd aged a decade in the past few hours. Marin and Tobin together, whispering. They walked right past me. Didn't stop. Didn't say anything. Except Tobin. He paused. looked at me. His face was red, and I couldn't tell if it was shame or anger or both. We didn't know, he said. You never asked. How were we supposed to? You could have called. You could have visited. You could have Googled how military rank works before accusing me of fraud. My voice was quiet, controlled. You could have trusted me. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Finally, Dad just thought, I don't care what Dad thought. You all chose to believe I was a liar instead of doing 5 minutes of research. That's on you. He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe apologize. Maybe defend himself. But I walked away before he could. Some things you don't come back from. Some breaks are permanent. The emails started the next day. From Marin first, I didn't know it would go that far. I'm sorry. Then Tobin, Dad's not handling this well. Can we talk? My mother, 2 days later, please call me. I need to explain. I didn't respond to any of them. I was back at work, back in classified briefings, back in a world where people trusted me to do my job without questioning whether I deserved to be there. The work was easier than family. Always had been. A week after the case was dismissed, I got orders for a temporary duty assignment, 3 weeks at Ramstein, coordinating with Yukum on a joint task force operation. I packed my bag and left without telling anyone where I was going. Germany was cold. Gray skies and rain that never quite stopped, just shifted from drizzle to downpour and back again. I worked 16-hour days in secure facilities, reviewed intelligence reports, coordinated with commanders across 3 services. It was exactly what I needed. Work I understood. Rules that made sense. A chain of command where rank meant something objective, something real. No one in Germany questioned whether I deserved to be there. I came back to find 17 more messages from my family. Voicemails. I came back to find 17 more messages from my family. Voicemails, texts, emails. All variations on the same theme. We're sorry, we didn't understand, can we talk? I deleted most of them without listening. But my mother's kept coming. One every few days. Not demanding, not defensive. Just there. Small updates about her life. Questions about mine that she didn't expect me to answer. A slow, steady persistence that reminded me why I'd loved her once. 3 weeks after I got back, she showed up at the base gate. The MP called my office. Ma'am, there's a Delia Calder here asking to see you. Says she's your mother. Should I'll be right there. I walked to the gate in my uniform, still wearing my flight suit from the morning's training exercise. My mother stood on the civilian side of the checkpoint, looking small and out of place. She was holding a coffee cup from the shop down the road, like she'd been waiting for a while. When she saw me, she didn't smile. Didn't try to hug me through the fence. Just looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Hi, she said. Mom. I know you don't want to talk to me. I know I don't deserve your time. But I drove 4 hours to get here, and I'm asking for 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes, and then I'll leave you alone if that's what you want. I should have said no. Should have turned around and gone back to work. But something in her voice stopped me. Not desperation, not manipulation. Just honesty. Wait here, I said. I signed her in as a visitor, got her a temporary pass, and walked her to the base coffee shop. We sat outside despite the cold, at a metal table far enough from other people that we could talk without being overheard. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Finally, my mother spoke. Your father isn't coming. He wanted to, but I told him no. This needs to be just us. I nodded. He's ashamed, she continued. He won't admit it, but he is. Seeing that general salute you, she stopped, swallowed. It broke something in him. The realization that he'd been wrong, that he'd taken you to court over his own insecurity. He can't face you yet. Good. Ria, Mom, he called me a liar. He testified in court that he never believed in me. Do you understand what that did? Do you have any idea how that felt? I know you don't. You can't. I kept my voice quiet, controlled. 20 years in the military had taught me how to stay calm even when everything inside was screaming. I sent you money when you needed it. I missed my own life to support yours. And the moment my success made Dad feel small, you all decided I must be lying. My mother's eyes filled with tears. You're right. Everything you're saying is right. We were wrong. I was wrong. Why? The question came out harder than I intended. Why did you believe him instead of me? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Because your father needed to believe it. And I've spent 40 years choosing him over everything else. Even when I knew he was wrong. There it was. The truth under everything. After Vietnam, he came back different, she continued. Angry. Lost. The military had given him purpose, and civilian life never measured up. He spent decades feeling like he'd failed, like his service didn't matter because he didn't rise high enough or stay long enough. And then she stopped, wiped her eyes. You became everything he'd wanted to be. And instead of being proud, he was threatened. That's not my fault. I know. None of this is your fault. You did everything right, Ria. You built an incredible career. You helped us when we needed it. You never asked for anything in return. And we repaid you by questioning everything you are. I looked away, focusing on a group of airmen walking past. Young kids, maybe 20 years old, laughing about something. They saluted me reflexively when they saw my rank. I returned it automatically. I don't know if I can forgive this, I said quietly. I'm not asking you to. Not yet. Maybe not ever. My mother reached across the table, but stopped short of touching my hand. I'm just asking if you can let me try to make it right. Even if it takes years. Even if it never works. Why should I? Because I'm your mother. And because I love you. And because I'm finally choosing you over him. I looked at her then. Really looked. She'd lost weight. Her hair was grayer than I remembered. She looked tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Are you leaving him? I don't know. Maybe. He won't go to counseling. Won't acknowledge what he did was wrong. Just sits in his chair watching TV and drinking beer like nothing happened. She shook her head. I can't live like that anymore. Can't pretend this is normal. We sat in silence for a while longer. The coffee in her cup had gone cold, but she kept holding it like she needed something to do with her hands. I'm not ready to forgive you, I finally said. And I don't know when I will be. But I'll answer your calls. We can talk. Small steps. My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face now. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. Probably. She smiled despite the tears. You get that honesty from your father, you know. He used to be like you, straightforward, no nonsense. Before everything else got in the way. I'm nothing like him. You're more like him than you think. Just the good parts. The parts he lost somewhere along the way. I stood. I need to get back to work. Okay. She stood too, gathered her things. Can I hug you? I hesitated. Then nodded. The hug was brief, awkward. We weren't there yet. Maybe we never would be. But it was something. As she walked back toward the gate, she turned. Ria? That general. When he saluted you. I've never been more proud of you than I was in that moment. You should have been proud before that. I know. I was. I just forgot how to show it. She left. I went back to work. And for the first time since the lawsuit started, I felt something other than anger or hurt. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe, eventually, something like understanding. 2 months later, my mother called. She'd moved out. Found an apartment near my sister's place. My father was still in the house, still refusing to acknowledge what he'd done. I'm done waiting for him to change, she said. I'm choosing me now. And you. If you'll let me. We started meeting for coffee once a month. Brief meetings, awkward at first. But slowly, carefully, we built something new. Not what we'd had before, that was gone, burned down in a courtroom. But something different. Something more honest. She never made excuses for what they'd done. Never asked me to forgive my father. Just showed up, consistently, and let her actions speak louder than words. Marin tried reaching out too. Long emails full of apologies and explanations. How Dad had convinced her I was lying. How she'd believed him because she wanted to believe him. How seeing General Cade had made her realize how wrong they'd all been. I responded once, I appreciate the apology. I'm not ready to rebuild yet. Maybe someday. She didn't push. Just sent a message every few months letting me know she was thinking of me. Baby steps towards something that might eventually become a relationship again. Tobin was harder. He'd been the catalyst in many ways, his jealousy, his resentment, his constant need to compete. He sent one apology text. I fucked up. I'm sorry. I never responded. My father never reached out at all. Through it all, I kept working, kept flying, kept doing the job I'd spent 20 years building toward. The military didn't care about my family drama. Operations continued. Briefings happened. The world kept turning, and I kept turning with it. Some nights I'd sit in my apartment near base and think about the courtroom. About General Cade walking in. About my father's face when he realized I'd been telling the truth all along. I didn't feel vindicated. Just tired. Tired of proving myself. Tired of defending my existence. Tired of being questioned by people who should have known better. But I also felt something else. Something harder to name. A kind of clarity. A stripping away of illusions. My family wasn't who I thought they were. And maybe I wasn't who they thought I was either. We'd all been living with these ideas of each other that didn't match reality. The lawsuit had burned all that away. Left us with the truth. We were strangers who happened to share blood. And maybe that was okay. Maybe some relationships aren't meant to survive. Maybe some breaks are necessary, even if they hurt. I didn't need my father's approval to be a colonel. I didn't need my siblings' belief to validate my career. I'd done this myself, earned every rank through work and sacrifice and dedication. The uniform on my back was real. The ribbons on my chest were earned. The respect I commanded wasn't given, it was built, one decision at a time, over 2 decades of service. They could doubt me all they wanted. It didn't change the truth. And that truth had walked into a courtroom wearing 4 stars and said, "She outranks us all." The promotion orders arrived on a Tuesday. I was in my office at Joint Base Andrews, reviewing intelligence reports for an upcoming operation, when my aide knocked. "Ma'am, you have a classified message from AFPC. Air Force Personnel Center." That could mean a lot of things: new assignment, transfer orders, administrative updates. I logged into the secure terminal and opened the message. Then read it again to make sure I wasn't misreading. "Ma'am?" My aide was still standing in the doorway. "Everything okay?" "I've been selected for promotion to Brigadier General." He grinned. "That's outstanding, ma'am. Congratulations." "Thank you, Captain." After he left, I sat there staring at the screen. Brigadier General. Oh, 7. 1 star. The rank my father had said was impossible for someone like me to reach. The notification included a timeline: promotion ceremony in 6 weeks, reassignment to Air Force Special Operations Command Headquarters, new responsibilities that would expand my operational scope significantly. I should have been excited. This was what I'd worked toward for 20 years. The recognition of everything I'd sacrificed and achieved. Instead, I felt hollow. I wanted to call someone. Share the news. Celebrate. But who? My mother would be proud, but the relationship was still fragile, still being rebuilt. My siblings, no. My father, definitely not. My friends were scattered across the globe, deployed or stationed at other bases. My boyfriend had broken up with me 2 years ago because I was married to the military. I hadn't dated since. I'd given everything to this career. And now, reaching one of its highest achievements, I had no one to share it with. The irony wasn't lost on me. I closed the message and went back to work. There were reports to review, operations to coordinate, real problems that needed solving. The promotion would be official in 6 weeks. Until then, nothing changed. Except everything had changed. I was going to be a general. That night, alone in my apartment, I stood in front of the mirror in my dress uniform. Full ribbons, current rank insignia, the weight of 2 decades visible in every detail. I tried to imagine what 1 star would look like on my shoulder. Tried to picture myself as Brigadier General Calder. It felt surreal. Like someone else's life. I thought about the courtroom. About my father testifying that I'd lied about my rank. About General Cade walking in and proving him wrong. If my father had doubted Colonel, what would he think of General? Probably nothing. He'd probably convince himself it was still somehow fake. Some people would rather believe a comfortable lie than an uncomfortable truth. I didn't tell my family about the promotion. Didn't call my mother or send emails to my siblings. Just filed the information away and kept moving forward. 3 weeks before the ceremony, General Cade called me into his office. "Congratulations on your selection," he said. Well deserved. Thank you, sir. I wanted to talk to you about something. He gestured for me to sit. The promotion ceremony. You get to choose who pins on your new rank. Usually it's family or a mentor. Have you thought about it? I hadn't. Honestly, I'd been trying not to think about the ceremony at all. I'm not sure yet, sir. He nodded. Given everything that happened with your family, I wanted you to know if you need someone, I'd be honored to do it. No pressure. Just an offer. Something in my chest tightened. General Cade had walked into that courtroom without being asked. Had defended me when my own family wouldn't. Had saluted me in front of people who'd called me a liar. And now he was offering this. Sir, thank you. I'd like that. If you're sure. I'm sure. He smiled slightly. You've earned this rank, Calder. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Not even family. Yes, sir. The ceremony was scheduled for a Friday morning. Standard military promotion ceremony, nothing elaborate, just the formal recognition of advancement in rank. My entire squadron would attend, along with other officers from the base, maybe some civilians from the Pentagon. A week before, my mother called. Marin told me about your promotion, she said. She saw it posted on the official Air Force website. Rhea, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. Thank you. Are you having a ceremony? Yes. Can I come? I was quiet for a long moment. Part of me wanted to say no. Wanted to keep this moment separate from all the family drama. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, wanted her there. Wanted someone who shared my blood to witness this. Just you, I finally said. Not Dad. Not Marin or Tobin. Just you. Of course. Just me. Thank you for letting me come. The ceremony was scheduled for 1,000 hours. I arrived early, wearing my dress uniform with colonel insignia for the last time. The ceremony would take place in the base auditorium, formal enough for the occasion, familiar enough that I felt comfortable. My mother arrived 30 minutes before start time. She wore a conservative blue dress, carried a small purse, looked nervous. I met her at the door. Hi, she said. Hi, Mom. You look like a general already. I smiled despite myself. Not yet. Another hour. We didn't talk much before the ceremony started. Just sat together in the waiting area, the silence not quite comfortable but not hostile either. Progress. The auditorium filled with people. Officers I'd worked with. Airmen from my squadron. Civilians from Joint Staff. Faces I recognized from briefings and operations. All here to witness this moment. General Cade arrived in full dress uniform, for stars gleaming. He found me backstage. Ready? Yes, sir. Your mother made it? She's in the audience. Good. Family should be here for this. Even if it's complicated. The ceremony began. The formalities. National anthem, opening remarks, reading of orders. Standard military ritual, familiar and grounding. Then General Cade called me forward. I walked to the center of the stage, faced the audience, stood at attention. General Cade stood beside me. Colonel Rhea Calder has been selected by the Department of the Air Force for promotion to the rank of Brigadier General, he announced. This promotion recognizes 20 years of exceptional service, demonstrated leadership, and continued dedication to the defense of our nation. He nodded to an aide, who brought forward a small box containing the new insignia, 1 silver star. General Cade removed my Colonel Eagles. Then, carefully, he pinned the star to my shoulder. By order of the President of the United States and the Secretary of the Air Force, Rhea Calder is promoted to the rank of Brigadier General, effective this date. The audience stood. Applauded. Some of the younger airmen whistled, against protocol, but nobody stopped them. General Cade saluted me. I returned it. Then he shook my hand and said quietly, so only I could hear, "Your father was wrong about you." About all of it. Yes, sir. I turned to face the audience. Found my mother in the 3rd row. She was crying, smiling, one hand over her heart. For a moment, just a moment, I felt vindication. Not the bitter kind I'd felt in the courtroom. Something cleaner. Simpler. I'd made it. Despite everything. Despite the doubt and the lawsuit and the family that didn't believe in me. I'd done exactly what I set out to do. I was a general. The ceremony concluded with more formalities. Photos. Congratulations from other officers. A reception in the adjacent room with cake and punch and awkward small talk. My mother approached carefully, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be proud. "Rhea," she said. General Calder. "That sounds right. It's still strange to hear. Can I hug you?" This time, I didn't hesitate. The hug was longer than the last one. Still not perfect. Still carrying the weight of everything that had happened. But healing. Slowly. "I wish your father could see this," she whispered. "He made his choice." "I know. But still. You deserve to have him here. To see him be proud." "I don't need his pride anymore, Mom. I stopped needing it the day he took me to court." She pulled back, looked at me. "You're stronger than I ever was." I had to be. We stood together for a while, watching officers come and go, listening to conversations about operations and deployments and the work ahead. Finally, my mother said, "What happens now? Where do they send you?" "I'll be here another month for transition. Then I'm moving to AFSOC headquarters in Florida. Deputy commander position. More operational authority, larger scope. You'll do amazing things. I'll do my job. Same as always." She smiled. "That's what makes you different from your father. He needed the glory. You just need the work." After she left, after the reception ended, I went back to my office. Sat at my desk in my new rank, 1 star on my shoulder, and felt the weight of it. Not the physical weight, the star itself was light, but the responsibility it represented. The expectations. The knowledge that I was now one of a very small number of women who'd reached this level. I thought about my father. About how he'd said I could never make colonel at my age. About how he'd testified in court that I was lying. I wondered if he knew about the promotion. If he'd seen it posted somewhere, or heard about it through family channels. I wondered what he thought. Then I stopped wondering. Because it didn't matter. His opinion, his approval, his pride, none of it mattered anymore. I'd built this career brick by brick, decision by decision, sacrifice by sacrifice. I'd earned every rank, every ribbon, every achievement. Nobody had given me anything. Nobody had made it easy. And I'd done it all without his belief. The uniform I wore was real. The star on my shoulder was earned. The respect I commanded wasn't inherited or borrowed or stolen. It was mine. I stood, walked to the window, watched planes take off in the distance. F-16s climbing into the evening sky, afterburners bright against the darkness. Somewhere out there, other officers were doing their jobs. Flying missions. Making decisions. Carrying the weight of service. I was one of them. Had been for 20 years. Would be for however many more years I had left. The courtroom felt very far away now. A bad dream. A painful memory. But not the defining moment of my story. This was the defining moment, standing in my office, wearing 1 star, knowing that I'd made it despite everything. Not because my family believed in me, but because I believed in myself. And sometimes, in the military and in life, that's the only belief that matters. 6 months later, I was standing in a conference room at Hurlburt Field, Florida, briefing a joint task force operation to a room full of senior officers. The operation was classified, complex, requiring coordination between multiple services and international partners. I'd been in my new position as deputy commander for 3 months. The work was intense, more strategic than tactical, more planning than executing. But it was exactly where I needed to be. Halfway through the briefing, my phone buzzed. I ignored it. Phone calls could wait. This operation couldn't. After the briefing ended, after I'd answered questions and coordinated follow-up actions, I checked the message. It was from my mother. "Your father had a heart attack. He's stable, but asking for you." I stared at the message for a long time. Asking for me. After everything. After the lawsuit, after the silence, after choosing his pride over his daughter, now he was asking for me. I should have felt something. Concern. Anger. Sadness. Something. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a cold, clinical assessment. He's stable. Not dying. Not an emergency. Just asking. I called my mother. "How bad is it?" "Mild heart attack. He'll recover." "But he's scared, Rhea." And he finally admitted he was wrong. About everything. It took a heart attack for that? She was quiet. Then, yes, it did. I'm not asking you to come. I'm just telling you he asked. I'll think about it. I hung up before she could respond. That night, I sat in my quarters at Hurlburt and thought about my father. About who he'd been when I was young versus who he'd become. About the pride that had turned toxic, the insecurity that had poisoned everything. Part of me wanted to go. To be the bigger person. To offer forgiveness even if it wasn't deserved. But another part, the part that had sat in that courtroom listening to him call me a liar, that part wasn't ready. Maybe never would be. I drafted a message to my mother. Tell him I'm glad he's recovering. Tell him I hope he uses this time to think about why it took a heart attack to admit the truth. Tell him I'm not ready to see him yet. Maybe someday. Maybe not. But I wish him well. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. My mother responded an hour later. I told him. He cried. He said he understands. I didn't respond. 3 days later, a package arrived at my office. No return address, but I recognized my father's handwriting on the label. Inside, a small wooden box. His Navy Corpsman insignia from Desert Storm. His service ribbons. A photo of him in uniform from 30 years ago. And a letter. I almost didn't read it. Almost threw it away without opening it. But in the end, I did. Ria, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Lying in that hospital bed, thinking I might die, I had a lot of time to think about my life. About what I'd built and what I'd destroyed. About the pride I held onto instead of the daughter I should have celebrated. You were everything I wanted to be. Everything I failed to become. And instead of being proud, I was jealous. Instead of supporting you, I tore you down. I told myself I was protecting you. That you were lying, that you couldn't really be as successful as you claimed. Because if you were telling the truth, it meant I'd wasted my potential. It meant I'd failed. So I made you the liar instead of facing my own failures. The general who walked into that courtroom, when he saluted you, I realized something. You hadn't just succeeded. You'd become extraordinary. And I'd spent years trying to diminish that because I couldn't handle my own inadequacy. I'm sorry. I know those words don't fix anything. Don't undo the hurt. Don't make up for the lawsuit or the doubt or the years of belittling your achievements. But I'm sorry. And I'm proud of you. And I was wrong. I hope someday you can forgive me. But if you can't, I understand. Your father, I read the letter 3 times. Then put it back in the box with his insignia and ribbons. It was a good apology. Honest. Self-aware. Everything I'd wanted to hear 2 years ago. But it was too late. Some wounds heal. Some don't. Some apologies come after the damage is already done, after the relationship is already dead, after forgiveness becomes impossible not because you won't give it, but because there's nothing left to forgive. My father and I were done. Not because I hadn't forgiven him, but because I'd moved past needing to. I'd built a life without his approval. Built a career without his belief. Become a general without his support. And in doing so, I'd realized something. His opinion had never mattered as much as I thought it did. What mattered was the work. The mission. The people who depended on me to make good decisions under pressure. What mattered was the uniform I wore and the oath I'd taken and the 2 decades I'd spent earning my place. My father's doubt couldn't diminish that. His apology couldn't enhance it. I was General Ria Calder. I'd earned that title. I'd paid for it with sacrifice and dedication and 20 years of my life. And that truth stood on its own, regardless of who believed it. I put the box in my desk drawer. Didn't throw it away, but didn't display it either. Just filed it away like old paperwork, acknowledged but not significant. Then I went back to work. There was an operation launching in 48 hours. A joint task force mission that required my sign-off. Real work. Real consequences. The kind of work that made everything else feel small by comparison. Because that's what military service teaches you. There's always another mission. Always another problem to solve. Always work that matters more than personal drama. You keep moving forward. You keep doing the job. You keep earning your rank every single day. And somewhere along the way, the people who doubted you become background noise. Irrelevant. 2 years after my promotion to Brigadier General, I was back in Virginia for a conference at the Pentagon. Routine trip, briefings, coordination meetings, the usual Washington bureaucracy. I had a free evening, so I drove out to my mother's apartment. We'd maintained regular contact, phone calls every few weeks, visits when I was in the area. The relationship wasn't what it had been before the lawsuit, but it was something. Something honest, at least. She'd made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. We ate and talked about surface things, her new job, my work that I couldn't discuss in detail, plans for the holidays. After dinner, she poured coffee and said, "Your father's getting remarried." I paused mid-sip. What? Married a woman he met at the VA, younger. Nice, from what Marin says. They're having a small ceremony next month. Good for him. He asked if I thought you'd come. I set down my coffee. What did you tell him? That he'd have to ask you himself. But he won't. He's too afraid you'll say no. He's right to be afraid. My mother nodded. I told him that too. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "I'm not asking you to go. I'm not even asking you to forgive him. I just thought you should know." Okay. Are you angry? I thought about it. Was I? Angry that he'd moved on, found someone new, was apparently building a different life? No, I realized. I'm not angry. I'm nothing. It doesn't affect me either way. That's probably healthy. Probably. More silence. Then, Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret it? Standing by him during the lawsuit? Letting it get that far? She looked at me for a long moment. Every day. Every single day, I regret not standing up for you. Not stopping it before it destroyed our family. It didn't destroy our family. The family was already broken. The lawsuit just made it obvious. Maybe you're right. She traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. I spent 40 years making excuses for your father. For his pride, his insecurity, his need to be right. I told myself I was being loyal. Being a good wife. What changed? Watching that general salute you. Seeing the respect in that room. Realizing that while I'd been defending your father's ego, I'd failed to see what you'd actually become. She looked at me. You didn't need us. You never needed us. You built all of this yourself. I wanted you, though. There's a difference between not needing and not wanting. I know. And I'm sorry we weren't there. Sorry I chose wrong. I reached across the table, took her hand. You're here now. That matters. Does it? I feel like I lost you a long time ago. You did. But maybe we can build something new. Not mother and daughter the way we were. Something different. Something more honest. She smiled through tears. I'd like that. We finished our coffee and talked about lighter things. She showed me photos of the garden she'd started. I told her about Florida, about the beach near base, about flying when I could find time. Normal things. The kind of conversation we should have been having all along. When I left that night, she hugged me at the door. I'm proud of you, Ria. I know I didn't say it enough before, but I'm so proud of who you've become. Thank you. You're a better person than I am. Stronger. Braver. I had to be. I drove back to my hotel thinking about family. About blood and loyalty and the difference between the two. About how sometimes the people who should support you are the ones who hurt you most. But also about forgiveness. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, where everyone cries and hugs and everything's fixed. The quiet kind. The kind where you let go of anger not because someone deserves it, but because carrying it is too heavy. I'd forgiven my mother. Not all at once, not completely. But enough. Enough to have coffee and conversation. Enough to rebuild something small and honest. My father was a different story. Maybe someday I'd feel something other than indifference. Maybe not. Either way was fine. Because my life didn't revolve around him anymore. Didn't revolve around proving him wrong or earning his respect or making him see the truth. My life revolved around the work. The mission. The thousands of people who depended on decisions I made in secure rooms with high-ranking officers. I was a general now. Not just in rank but in authority. In responsibility. In the weight of command. And that mattered more than any family drama ever could. The next morning, I was back at the Pentagon. Back in briefings. Back in the world where rank meant something objective, where respect was earned through confidence, where your value was measured by your decisions rather than your relationships. It was easier than family. It always had been. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some people are meant for service more than domesticity. Maybe some of us find our family in uniforms and mission briefs and shared purpose. I'd made peace with that a long time ago. Standing in that Pentagon conference room, surrounded by maps and intelligence reports and strategic assessments, I felt more at home than I ever had at family dinners. This was where I belonged. This was what I'd built. This was the truth that courtroom had tried to question. And no amount of doubt, from family or anyone else, could change it. Because real authority isn't given. It's earned. And I'd earned mine. Thanks for watching. If this hit home, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder. Quick questions for you. Have you ever had to prove your worth to family or friends who doubted you? Where do you draw the line between loyalty and boundaries? If your family took you to court over your success, what would you do first? Would you try to rebuild after a betrayal like this, or walk away for good? What's one thing you wish you'd said in that kind of room? Drop your answers in the comments, I read them. And if you're reclaiming your voice after being underestimated, you're not alone.